This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
This is A Different Perspective with Kevin Randle. A retired U.S. Lieutenant Colonel, Kevin Randle has been studying UFOs for nearly 50 years. Kevin has investigated some of the most famous UFO cases in the world and has been consulted for dozens of documentaries about UFOs. Considered one of the leading experts into the Roswell UFO crash of 1947, Kevin has written more than 25 books about UFOs, including the recently published Roswell in the 21st Century. Now, here is the host of A Different Perspective, Kevin Randle.
And good evening. This is truly Kevin Randle, and this is truly A Different Perspective. In a moment, I'm going to be joined by Brad Steiger, who actually appeared on my radio show that I had in El Paso, Texas, 2 decades ago. So, Brad and I go back a long way in that respect. In fact, I've known Brad for quite a number of years, and I've been trying to get him on the program for a while here, but situations just didn't work out for us to do it or connect before now. But now we're ready for our great Halloween Spooktacular, and we'll be telling some horrible UFO stories, I guess. Brad claims to have written his first book at age 7, but he doesn't claim that they published it. So
No, that's one of those wonderful. Well, I simply said, and Kevin, you know me well enough. If you heard me say, if someone asked you when you write your first book, I said, well, I think I was 7, but it drew heavily on House at Pooh Corner. So I meant it as a jest, saying I've always wanted to be a writer, even when I sat and copied the Winnie the Pooh books. But people took it literally. Oh, he wrote his first book at age 7. Not quite.
And that's why I said, but he doesn't claim it was published, because people say to me,
right.
How many books have you written? And I always say, do you want to know how many I've written, how many I've sold, or how many have been published? I mean, it's 3 different numbers. I've got a number of books that I've written that aren't sold anywhere. They're still laying around somewhere. But I was attempting to do a very nice introduction for you. And
that was nice. Nice.
I haven't gotten through it yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say he became a full-time writer in 1967 and authored and co-authored almost 170 books, which have been sold 17 million copies. And I mentioned that he wrote the bestseller Strangers in the Sky about UFOs because I remember sitting in a high school study hall reading that book, which actually dates me as well, I think, as well as you, because I was in high school at the time. And I thought that was important to let you know that. I was reading that instead of the biology text I was supposed to be reading. And as I said, I've known Brad for decades and remember calling him many, many years ago to ask about a specific case of a mysterious disappearance from Wales in the 20th century. And you told me right off the bat, well, it's a hoax. And I thought that was a wonderful way to start a conversation. But I was calling to confirm the information that I'd read in other places, and your name had come up. And I thought, well, I know how to get a hold of Brad Steiger. I'll call and ask him. And that was the first thing you said to me. So I was delighted with that because it helped me out a great deal. And since that time, I've followed your career, and note that we sometimes argue about who has written the most UFO books. We're not sure who it is. I believe it's you. You sometimes say it's me, and Nick Redfern is attempting to catch us both.
Yes,
So
he is. Yes, he
we've
is.
got to
He denies that, though. He denies that. Yeah.
Well, I just had my book Encounters in the Desert about the Socorro UFO sighting come out in the last couple of days, as a matter of fact. So
Yeah.
I may have gotten one up on Nick at that point. Nick
Yeah.
also delves into other things, as do you, and as do I.
Yes, right.
And I thought the Socorro kind of leads us into where we want to go, because here's a story of Lonnie Zamora seeing two alien creatures running around, or walking around, or standing around in basically central New Mexico back in 1964, and some of the things went on about that. So that gets us into the idea of alien visitation, and it gets us into the idea that there's creatures, beings, entities flying those craft. And I know you've done some stuff on this. And quickly, before I run out of time here, what do you think of the Socorro case?
It was very fascinating at the beginning of research, and I still want to believe in that one. But now we've had the traditional college students did it. That's come out now. It was just a joke. And then, of course, which I think is the most nefarious one, that Lonnie did it to get more tourists coming to the city or the little town there. And all of these things have, I think, follow this kind of cycle that we're in.
Let me interrupt you here, Brad, because I have to take a break right now. We will be back with Brad Steiger in just a moment, talking about alien creatures and alien visitation, so stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
As promised, I am back with Brad Steiger, fellow Iowan. We're talking about alien visitation at the moment and creatures from that. And it gives me an opportunity to plug Encounters in the Desert, which is my book about the Socorro case, which just came out. You were saying before we went away, I think talking about the Lonnie Zamora having hoaxed it for the tourist trade. And
right.
I don't think you bought into that one.
No.
Well, I think I was going to say Philip Glass kind of threw that out, and it really is nonsensical.
Yeah, I guess I was impressed because Dr. Hynek found this of interest. And then, of course, there's that puzzling, and I can't wait to read your new book. The emblem that's on the craft, I think is very provocative in so many ways, because it's kind of like a message to our species. We recognize that symbol, whether we want to admit it or not. It's probably not from any language, but in our deeper unconsciousness, I think it shows a residence. I think it shows a home. I think it shows, a unity. And whatever the UFO phenomena is, and I tend to think now it's probably multidimensional, but you can't. No one knows for sure. And in my mind, Kevin, this is not just gratuitous flattery, but I think you are the supreme of the ufologists, because I really admire how deeply you go and how you take your knocks. I mean, you accept people's criticism and then you answer it. So I'm curious to hear what you say about both now. I said how people are trying to defame it. Wow, what did you say in your book? Now, I don't want you to give things away, but let's tease people. I want to read the book. Other people will want to read it too.
Well, I was going to say that we do. I go into depth on the symbol and what the true symbol is, and how that was. That the whole story of the symbol has evolved since the beginning of the Socorro case, and there's a long chapter about what is the correct symbol. So I look at that because it is kind of an important part of the entire case. Mm-hmm. But if you look at actually the bungling of the investigation that began the very night it happened, with the Army officer there, Captain Holder, the FBI guy there, Arthur Burns, and what they did and what they learned and the reports they made. I had always said, and this is the probably the last thing I'll say about that during this program, but I've always said that the problem with the Zamora case, it was single witness. And looking into the case, find out it's not. There were three people who called. There were three people who called the police station prior to anything that Zamora said, saying they'd seen a blue flame or something in the sky, and nobody followed up on it. Holder mentioned it. Holder mentioned it in his report written that very night. He mentioned three people called the police station, and Hynek didn't follow up on it, and Ray Stanford didn't follow up on it. The Lorenzens didn't follow up on it. The Air Force didn't follow up on it. Nobody followed up on that really critical piece of evidence. If you could have found those people, and it shouldn't have been that hard to find them in Socorro, New Mexico, because you know the flight path, and you could have been knocking on doors in those neighborhoods to see, did you see this thing? Did you hear this thing? Nobody followed up on that. So that was kind of one of the things that disturbed me about that case. So I look at the totality of the evidence and lay out my conclusions and what I think was going on in the case. But this really gets us into alien visitations and alien creatures.
Right.
And I know you've got some wonderful stories about that sort of thing. So what have you learned in your investigations, vast though they are, of alien creatures in the past?
Well, obviously, after Strangers from the Skies, that really, I think I was brought to New York to finish my biography of Rudolph Valentino, the one that was later made into a film. And so, of course, here's an Iowa boy, never been to New York before, and I'm meeting all kinds of editors through the course of working with the publisher, McFadden Bartell at that time. But I'm meeting other editors, and this is kind of, like a dream fulfillment for the kid from the cornfield. And I had Ivan T. Sanderson, the naturalist scientist, had begged me to do a book on poltergeists. Now, he was reading my weekly column in a tabloid called A Walk on the Weird Side by Brad Steiger. So he had been reading that for about a year, and he says, you've got to do poltergeists. Well, I had sold this book on poltergeists, but I came to do finish the Valentino story. And an editor whom I, really enjoyed talking with, and we kind of hit it off, he said, "What do you think about UFOs?" And I said, "Well, they're in my files, but I'm basically a phenomenologist. I'm basically a psychical researcher, but I kind of think, there's a bleed through there. There's a blending." And he said, "Well, would you like to do one?" And I said, "Yes." And that became Strangers from the Skies, which came out, again, one of those things which a book has to do somehow, a movie has to do. It has to hit, the feeling of the time, the zeitgeist of the moment, and it did, and it really took off. And suddenly I'm a ufologist, which I've never really claimed, but I certainly have researched now in foreign countries and every state and province in the U.S. and find it totally fascinating and totally maddening. And one of the things that I, of course, was drawn to is, what do people see? Do they actually see entities with us, or are they just seeing shiny things going over in the sky? Well, it turns out I'm getting reports right and left from the book of all kinds of people who are telling me of the incredible creatures that they've seen. I mean, it varies. Well, just to flip through the book, from little green men, the blonde Nordics, the grays, the praying mantises, which are among the creepiest to me, and the reptilians and serpent people, robots and androids, and hairy dwarfs. Now, that's just a few of the classes of entities that people are seeing.
Well,
We go way.
one of the things that has struck me is reports coming out of South America. And I
Yeah,
point there because they come there. But I've seen drawings of the alien creatures that look amazingly like the spacemen from Earth versus the Flying Saucers. I've seen mutants that look an awful lot like the creatures from This Island Earth. Couldn't think of the name of the movie at the moment, with the big
Right.
bulbous heads. And there's other things that come out of there, people reporting creatures that seem inspired by science fiction films.
Well, that science fiction films, mythology, fairy tales. Now, we go way back to one of the early sightings of the dear lady walking in the woods in Italy. And she suddenly has two entities come out and tear at her clothing, not with the idea of sexuality, I'm sure, but she runs and they grab her scarf and they try to hold her. And she describes them like, to me, kind of giant chipmunks with engineering suits on and some strange kind of helmets. Now, the artists in the area, and I know you've seen it too, have caught them very well. And so again, we say this is one of the very early reports. Where did this come? This is a woman who spent a lot of time in the woods, in the forest. She lived kind of like Hansel and Gretel back in the woods. Now, if this is a entity that looks in a way we cannot perceive, and it wants to reveal itself, then it's going to have to choose some form. And if we're giving that entity those kind of powers, it goes into her subconscious and recognizes the animals she deals with on a daily basis and puts them in an engineering suit to signify they are an intelligent species that have come from somewhere else. Now, I see this kind of thing repeating itself, where, what you see is what you get, and what you perceive is what you will receive. If you have grown up on Buck Rogers, if you have grown up on and some of the science fiction classics, and people then describe the entities to me, and I'm going all the way back now, Kevin, to the 60s when I got invited to speak here and invited to speak there, so because of Strangers in the Sky. So I thought, I'm really getting into the subject. I'm really seeing an area of research that fascinates me. So I would interview the people that would come up from the audience. I had this sighting, I had that sighting, I saw this entity, and begin to really interview them in depth. And you see that kind of commonality, and I hate always to make generalities, but again, it seems so much, as I said, what you see, what you believe is what you get, and what you perceive is what you receive. So the people who want to see a godlike being that has come like the gentleman carpenter in The Day the Earth Stood Still, which I think, really launched the whole contactee movement, or a good part of it, because it was pretty difficult to sit through that movie and not be moved. And those of us who have gone to Sunday school, we recognize that carpenter becomes so obviously a Christ figure or a Jesus figure during the course of the film, and then he leaves us with a kind of promised threat is, okay, you guys better behave down here now, or we're going to take measures.
Let me interrupt here because I'm going to have to take a break, which is unfortunate. And I was going to ask you about it's seeming that the stories of entities kind of evolved as the UFO field evolved. I'll get into that in a moment here because I'm running out of time. I did want to mention that if y'all are interested in these sorts of things, take a look at the other fine programs on the X-Zone Broadcast Network at xzbn.net, and you got a whole list of programs that will probably interest you in some fashion about these sorts of activities. I will be back with Brad Steiger in just a moment. We will be talking about aliens in space suits when I come back, so stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
As promised, just moments ago, I am back with Brad Steiger. We were talking about alien entities, creatures from inside the spacecraft. And as Brad was speaking, he triggered a thought in my mind in something that I had talked about in the past, that when people talked about seeing the entities back in the late 40s, early 50s, in that time frame, they almost were invariably in some kind of a spacesuit, some kind of helmet apparatus, some kind of breathing apparatus going on. And as we move beyond that, they seem to shed their spacesuits. They would be wearing flying suits type things. The guys at Socorro, for example, and I promise not to mention Socorro, but they were in white coveralls as opposed to some kind of a spacesuit, which gave rise to the opinion that this might have been some kind of government experiment, although no documentation has ever been found to prove that. So when we talked about the earlier entities, they were in spacesuits type thing, and I guess you noticed the same thing.
Absolutely. And again, Carpenter, the Christ figure that comes in The Day the Earth Stood Still, he puts on a suit when he talks to the scientist, the Einstein-type character, and when he interacts with the woman and her son. But when he returns, he is definitely in a space suit as he's going to go back, and Gort has rescued him. We have...
Well, let me interrupt, because I wanted to make 2 points here. Number one, when we first see him, he's in a spacesuit with a helmet on, so you don't see that he's actually a human. You see a humanoid.
Oh yeah, at the very beginning.
At the very beginning. And the other thing is, you're making the parallel between Christ, and I mean, his name is Carpenter, and we all get that.
Right.
I think.
Right.
But the other thing is, he's actually killed at the end of the movie. Gort comes and gets the body and resurrects him, which is another aspect of the Christ story there, before he goes off and says, hey, says, if you don't listen to us, we're going to reduce this planet to a burned out cinder. And and I think Dr. Bernard says, is that possible? Is that how such power exists? And he says, sure, let me assure you that such power exists. So the parallel is strictly there. So he's in the spacesuit in the movie, and Gord is, of course, the big robot that you have to say Klaatu Barada Nikto to, in case.
That's right, Klaatu Barada Nikto.
In case you do not want to get disintegrated by it.
Right.
But
I always remembered that, just in case I run into a Gort.
Yeah, you and everybody else, I think, talking about that. When I was a teenager, after having read your book as a teenager, and I mean, I bought it I still have my copy of Strangers from the Sky.
My goodness. Oh my goodness.
The 25-cent paperback version of it. But a friend of mine, Eric Novotny, and I had started an organization that we called Office of Scientific Intelligence, which was a name we plagiarized from a science fiction film because we thought it was neat. And our motto was Klaatu Barada Nikto, because we figured nobody'd get it. But
nobody would.
but you would, of course.
Yeah.
Anyway, alien creatures. When we talk about alien creatures, we get a great diversity of creatures, I guess. Is there some kind of a commonality that we see other than humanoid? Although we've talked about hairy dwarfs and I think beanbag type creatures as well. But is there some kind of a commonality that we see through the descriptions of the alien creatures?
Not anymore. Not anymore. The commonality at the beginning, if we want to say, 47 and so forth, approximately was the beginning. Then we had basically the smallish creature, the, quote, proverbial little green man, though I don't think anyone ever described them as being green, but the size. And they were almost always, and I think I can say always, in spacesuits. And they acted the role of little astronauts that have come here from another world. They really were, like little mannequins, little puppets, that would do kind of what the overall belief in this concept that we're being contacted should look like. Larger heads, because that symbolizes they have bigger brains because they got here before we got there, and larger eyes, all those things which seem to symbolize, for some people, wisdom and the ability to see the future or whatever. But then we move into the gray, which is not in a spacesuit. He's in his altogether. And it is much more unattractive than the little green men that we began with. He looks, like some kind of clay figure, and the gray took over great popularity, should we say? But now we've moved into, which I think, grotesque, like the praying mantises, and the reptilians and the serpent people. Now, the reptilians Okay, there's all kinds people are building logic why interspace travelers would be reptilian. They would easily hibernate. They'd be able to slow down their bodily functions. And we, of course, have all kinds of legends throughout our historical development of the flying serpents, and then, of course, the devil is to look like a serpent, but the devil is really giving us information. So maybe those were reptilians. Maybe those demons we talked about who were reptilian in appearance, maybe they were these ancient astronauts that came from another world and are still coming and feel, in a sense, this planet belongs to them. So the serpent people are very popular now. In fact, while I was awaiting your call, I was going through today's mail, and I have a very enthusiastic letter from a person who totally believes in the serpent people and hybrids. The serpent people are breeding with us, and that's kind of taken over a large section of research right now, Kevin.
Well,
I don't know if.
yes, I'm aware of that, but the problem, I have a problem with the genetics.
Well, yes, of course. Yes,
when
of course.
when you start talking about these crude experiments going on where the aliens come down and impregnate our women, I mean, to create the hybrids, which I always thought was backwards. If I was doing that, I'd want to be able to control the experiment, and rather than impregnating our women and throwing them back into the environment to see what happens, I'd have Earthmen impregnating their women so they can control it. But I really don't see how the genetics would work.
Well, but you see, whatever this is, the great brain that controls all this, they've heard people like you saying that. So now the contactees, the people who believe in the hybridization of our planet, they don't simply have sexual intercourse now. It's a whole laboratory to which they go, in which they're never quite aware how the semen or how the is injected, because they go into kind of a trance, and they don't really realize until they're pregnant several months later that that's what happens. They recall it then in a kind of regressive state when they're sleeping or whatever. So that objection has been eliminated. You see, it can't help thinking, and pardon me now for becoming good old mystical Brad here, but a brain, a zeitgeist, somehow a linkage to our own development. And you know, one of my great passions is who are we really? You know, Worlds Before Our Own has been one of my bestsellers, and which came before all the others who have written about the subject. And that still fascinates me. And I subscribe to a number of publications where we are going farther and farther back in time. We are going with discovery of, if not Homo sapiens, and we really shouldn't use that because they're really hominids. And the number of hominids, I mean, it used to just be Neanderthal, right? Well, now we have the Denisovans, we have all kinds of, we're finding teeth that now they examine it, and through the marvelous science they have, and that is yet representing another hominin species. So how often have we been here? How much have we learned, and how are we really an independent species, or is there, like someone has said, what's the movie that's based on? Oh heck, I lost the name of it. Oh well. Anyway, as if there is an alternate reality going on at the same time, and that's why we're having scientists working with so many dimensions that we may be experiencing at the same time. And it's really becoming more complicated than simply aliens walking on Earth. It is the big picture, I think, is emerging, and it's a fascinating one. And we see that, how much control do we have? And I don't mean to be a nihilist here, but, are we really an independent species? How much are we subjected to forces and thoughts and manifestations of the future in which we're being directed in a certain way, in which we're being programmed a certain way? I look at what's happening with social media. I'm looking at what's happening, with the marvelous computers and our TV and all these things that are making life better. Better? Well, I mean, it's making us lazier, it's making us sloppier, it's making us, we don't want to read anymore because we can just look at a screen. And it seems, that whatever force we create when we blend as a species, the zeitgeist is commonly used, but it may be, that it becomes almost it is an entity unto itself that is directing and programming us as a species.
Well, let me interrupt here because I have to take my break because I'm required to. For more information about this, take a look at bradandsherry.com. And of course, I'll always put up some information, additional information on my blog at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com. You'll see some of the things that are going on in the world of ufology today and that sort of thing. If you take a look at that, and take a look at X-Zone Broadcast Networks at xzbn.net. I will be back right after this for my final segment with Brad Steiger, so stick around.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
We are back, and by we, I mean Brad Steiger and me. We are back. We were talking about, I guess, sort of alien visitation, but Brad has spun it off now into multiverses and interdimensional problems as well. So looking at the broad picture of this, do you think we're being visited by beings from other worlds in our universe, inside our galaxy, or do you subscribe to a kind of a multiverse, cross-dimensional thing, or are you kind of in both camps?
I'm kind of in both camps. And I interrupted myself in our last segment, which isn't uncommon for me to do. But I mentioned while I was waiting for your welcome ring on the phone, I was reading today's email. And one thing we should mention, Kevin, is, when are they going to land? When are they? There's a large segment of, you can't say the public, of course, but, well, yes, you can.
The UFO community.
The UFO community and the public has been influenced by a large section of the UFO community to accept that they're already here. So the letter I had today was they are certain now that this Ukrainian singer is from the Pleiades, and she is singing special songs that kind of lull the human species into peace and contentment, and recognizing that the Pleiadians and the Arcturans are here. They've always been here, and they're here to take care of us. They're here to watch over us. There's no fear. Now I'm getting chills just saying those words. But we have this species now again. So I have to hear and see this marvelous representative. Well, she's a lovely woman. She has a lovely voice, but
you say she's from the Ukraine?
Yes.
So she has no association with Billy Meyer?
No. I don't think so. I don't know. This was just sent to me, and of course I get these kinds of letters all the time. But the Pleiadians, the Arcturans, and the others are here. They're helping us. And again, it's this need that when we're in trouble, when times are getting hard, we really can't do it on our own. We have to have help. Well, that is negating our entire mission as a species, to recognize that we can take care of ourselves. We can learn to be a structured society. We can learn to get along, for God's sake. We can learn to recognize that we all are one, and we're moving toward what can be a much greater tomorrow. But I think the fact that the Pleiadians are now coming in here, I don't think they're going to help us at all. I think they'll just confuse things. But what I'm saying is, now we've graduated, you see, from the little green men, or the little species that we saw in Socorro, and we progressed all the way up from the Nordics, from the various other entities, to the fact that, to the claim, the supposition, that they're already here, and they're here to help us and guide us and direct us. Well, I think too often in our history as a species, someone has tried to direct us and help us and take care of us, and we don't need it anymore.
Well, one thing I've noticed in the abduction phenomenon, for example, that the creatures being described as the abductees in the United States are basically the Greys. But when you look at the rest of the world, they have a wide variety of different creatures that are involved in the abductions.
Right.
And you've noticed that as well.
Yes. And this, it seems to be they're getting better looking all the time, Kevin. they're getting they're becoming a model for us now. I don't think too many of us want to look like the entity seen at Socorro, but some of the people now that others claim are Pleiadians or from another space, are, of course, ideal-looking men, ideal-looking women, and fit all the requirements and fantasies that one might have about creatures from outer space. It's kind of like the vampire. You know, we have Nosferatu, which is an accurate depiction of a vampire as a weaselly, ugly, rodent-type creature. That's what the vampire looked like traditionally. But then, of course, we had, Count Dracula coming, and he's an aristocrat, and he dresses well, and he doesn't drink wine, but we can't do a vampire movie without the vampire being an extremely attractive man or woman. So we keep pushing the old tradition, which maybe was a little, skin your knees and hurt your elbows, but that's life, to an idealization of what is waiting for us with the aliens.
So you're suggesting that as we've seen the evolution of the vampire from the weasel to an attractive man or woman, we now have the aliens in alien visitation from other planets following the same kind of evolution, at least in the stories that are being told.
At least in the stories that are being told. Currently.
Yes, currently. And do you see an end game here?
Oh, well, as I say,
I know, I got 2.5 minutes.
I grew up in the 30s and 40s, and, what happened at that time is indelibly etched in all of our minds. And, when you lost uncles and cousins and brothers and so forth, you just say, we don't need anyone to decide who's right and who's wrong, who's good and who's evil. This is the responsibility of our species, to be able to make intelligent decisions. I resent anyone from anywhere making those decisions for us.
Well, let me ask this, because I got very little time left, but are you currently working on a new book, a new direction for your research, or are you just kind of kicking back?
Kind of kicking back. I'll be 82 in another couple of months here. And I don't know. I've written 195 books now, and I'll have a new one coming out next summer, which explores what are ghosts really? What are they really? And maybe if I do another book, it'll probably be, what are aliens really? Really, what are they?
But the book you've got coming out, that's already been handed in, I take it.
Yes.
So you're going through will be going through the process of proofreading and all of that other nonsense.
Yes.
That seems to have devolved to the author now, when there used to be people in New York and whatnot who did that sort of thing. That seems that we all now end up with having to do that as well.
Well, I'm fortunate in that I actually have a very sane and helpful editor, so that helps.
Well, that's good. Listen, Brad, I'm running out of time, as you know. It's been delightful talking to you and picking your brain on all these various aspects of ufology and the paranormal. And I'm sure if we can arrange it, you'd come back on the program at some future date.
Oh, most certainly.
Well, thank you very much for joining us here on A Different Perspective. For those of you who are interested, take a look at bradandsherry.com. You'll find some more stuff about Brad and Steiger and Sherry Steiger and what they've been doing and their research activities. And as I always say, take a look at www.kevinrandle.blogspot.com, because I will have some comment about what we've talked here today, and maybe some other links for you to take a look at and get a little bit more information. And find out that Brad has written 190 some books, is way ahead of me, so I'll never catch him. So I'm not even going to try. When you get a chance, take a look at Encounters in the Desert, which is my new book. It's out now. It's about the Socorro UFO landing. Gives you an idea of what went on there and that sort of thing. And I think it's always important to point out that there are some other great programs on the X-Zone Broadcast Network at xzbn.net, or if I was in Canada, I'd say xzbn.net, because they don't say Z in Canada for some reason. I don't know what it is. But take a look at some of those programs, and I'm sure you'll find things that'll interest you in that arena as well. And I try to point out that Roswell in the 21st century gives you a dispassionate look of where the Roswell case stands today, as opposed to where it was 20 years ago when we were all so excited about the Roswell case and what it was going to provide for ufology. Next week, I'm going to be joined by Robert Powell, and we're going to be talking about an organization that is being formed now to do additional UFO research, and has nothing to do with the announcements in the last couple of days from, I think it's Tom DeLonge or formerly of Blink 182. I will be back in 167 hours with another edition of A Different Perspective, so stick around. Or don't go away.